with a little bit of wealthy windy down in Fort Morgan. Gulf Shores, I think, is a little more redneck Riviera, just overall. And then Orange Beach is just all wealthy windy to my perspective. Now, there's benefits to this though. Most of my portfolio is all in Fort Morgan. I genuinely love it down there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some folks have issues with this because it's 20 minutes off the beaten path back to Gulf Shores proper. And everybody uses the hangout as like their main center um, checkpoint to
Mm-hmm.
location. But what folks don't realize is that the isolation, that is the experience, that is the marketing piece. And when you use AI systems, whether it's Rank Breeze or it's Claude or it's Chat, whatever it is that you're really into, and you pull reviews from comparables, you never see someone, well, I wouldn't say never, but more often than not complaining about the distance. They're typically using keywords like, you know, we loved the isolation. It was the perfect getaway. It was an escape. This family is coming packed with groceries and drinks. They're coming to avoid the traffic, the headache, and that's where they want to be. Now, as an investor, the beautiful thing about this is that it's a 15 to 25% discount when you own down on the peninsula down in Fort Morgan. And a lot of the revenues are still very identical um, to some extent anyways, well within Gulf Shores proper. Now, we can't
Mm-hmm.
really compare Fort Morgan, Gulf Shores to Orange Beach, um, but we can get quite close. What really works down there is either two subgroups. It's either we're looking for a condo that's 350 to 400K or below, or we're looking at a large beach house that's probably somewhere to the tune of $800,000 on average, up to 1.2. Realistically, anything over 1.4, unless it has a private heated pool, it's tier one with the best views. It really is not going to work for us. Now, Gulf Shores has its own unique avatar as an investor looking to make a purchase there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's typically the investor that is not quite so heavily amenity focused, but more wants views and a nice room and prefers location. If that's you, then that's where we need to place you. Now, if you want a mix of everything, if you want top amenities, best buildings, best location, it's Orange Beach all the way. And realistically, what works over there is one bedrooms that are 450 to 550, or three bedrooms that are 650 to 850.
Got it. That's awesome. Okay. It sounds like, I mean, this is definitely something where people are looking kind of on that Gulf Coast area. This is a place that they shouldn't be overlooking, right? So, what's different between, let's say, Destin, 38, Panama City Beach? What's different from that market to this market?
So we really have three things. That's really what I tell folks. One, I will give it up to our Florida team all day long.
Yeah.
They have they have prettier water. They have so many great cities over there to be bought in, 38, Destin, PCB, all up and down the coast. Those are my competitors being in Gulf Shores. But a couple of things that they really can't scratch over here is the fact that our HOA fees, for buildings, which I get a lot of East Coast folks with concerns over HOA fees. These are going to cover things like your Wi-Fi, your water, your pest, your trash, your sewer, um, and that's fine. So we take that into consideration. But over in 38, a lot of those fees on average, and this is just a statistical average, they're $1,200 to $2,000 a month, where most of our HOA fees are under $1,200 a month. I would say averaging 650 to 950. The next big thing is a lot of the insurance assessments. We don't really have those ongoing over here, not at least to the extreme that the Florida markets do. And then finally, hurricanes. I Googled this. I was just curious. I don't know how much fact there is to this, but I spouted all day long. But we're a third less likely to get slammed by a large hurricane compared to our Florida counterparts.
What does that do for insurance prices?
For us, it keeps it way more manageable. Um, and when you start to consider, you're like, well, what is insurance? For a lot of these condos, because your HOA fee pays for the building's insurance policy, you're typically looking at what's called an HO3 or an HO6 policy, and that's around about $100 to $120 a month, give or take a few bucks. If you're looking at a primary home, depending on the location where you're at, we have these little things called Cobra zones down here. It's coastal barrier something something association. Long story short, we built where it's a little bit more of a higher risk. Those policies could be anywhere from 1,200 to 1,500 a month, or if you're in a non-Cobra region, then you're looking at somewhere around 850 a month, and that includes homeowners plus your flood altogether. And depending on the price point of the home that you're looking at buying, I don't really think that's quite horrible.
Yeah, yeah, totally makes sense. So we kind of already talked about like who's coming to the area. Is it more seasonal? Is it year round? What does that look like?
So I tell a lot of folks this, it really is going to depend on the size of unit that you buy. If you're a little more, you know, I wouldn't really quite say paranoid, but you're very concerned about making sure that occupancy stays high, so year-round cash flow stays high, then we want to put you in a studio to a two-bedroom unit. Our average, and this is a statistical average, is right around 68% for the year. My personal units see somewhere in the mid 70s to low 80s if you average it out over the year for overall occupancy.
Hmm.
You know, so a large house, prime example, 5 bed, 5 bath, you're going to see a 20 to 30% occupancy in the off season. The booking lead window shrinks down to about 14 days. So
Wow.
it's very, very last minute bookings that arrive. Now, if you have a studio to a two-bedroom, you have way more options.
Yeah.
Either you're being prepared in your dynamic pricing and you're way far out, dropping your rates down to say 80 to $100 a night to get multiple snowbirds. You found a snowbird, or you're just attracting, Gulf Shores does a great job about boosting off-season traffic through fishing tournaments, sports tournaments, food festivals, and all those things. And so you have a higher likeliness of a higher occupancy in those smaller units. But overall, it's a very seasonal town. I tell folks, if I tell you that the gross revenue we estimate is going to be, let's just say, $60,000 for the year, then I think you're going to make 85 to 90% of that 60,000 between April and October. Anything else that you make in November through February is just going to be a bonus, and it's just kind of meant to kind of float you through until the real money starts flowing back in.
It's interesting because we're considering finding a place down south in Florida to kind of hang out in the winter from Asheville and avoid the cold. And it sounds like something like this is a good option for that because you're kind of making, like you said, that 85-90% of your revenue between April and October. So if you wanted to use it from October to April, it sounds like that's a really good place to use it. So it's kind of the other side of the coin for seasonality because we hear a lot of people say things like they want to see really good all year round, things like that. But that means that you can't really use the property. So if this is kind of a mix between a lifestyle asset and something that you want to cash flow, something like this is really interesting because you have really high occupancy for, that 6 or 7 months and then kind of lower occupancy for the other time of the year where maybe you could use it a lot more. And I don't think there's anybody in the US that's saying they don't want to escape the cold in winter.
No, absolutely not. And I think February is probably my favorite time to come down. Everyone, all the major vendors are kind of back in play. Things are opening back up really, but yet it's quiet enough. And it's always so interesting to meet all the different people, all the snowbirds, and hear their life experiences and their stories, and the the different accents from all around the country because everybody is out there. All the folks from far up north, the East Coast. I mean, we got them all coming in. So it's really really fun, and the weather is still equally as nice. I mean, 50s to 60s, which is chilly for us down here,
Yeah.
but it's still very enjoyable with heated amenities, hot tubs, heated pools.
So let's talk about what types of properties or what bedroom counts. Is there certain neighborhoods, bedroom counts, types of properties? What's best from condo to single family, houseboats? Give us the dirt.
So statistically, so we have somewhere around 15,000 active listings, um, in between Gulf Shores and Orange Beach. And of those, 2 and 3 bedrooms hold the highest inventory count. Um, and so studios and 1 bedrooms are by far the shallowest. Actually, studios, I have it right here in front of me. Studios are 3 to 4%, and 1 bedrooms are 11 to 12%. Um, 2 bedrooms is the highest count at 38% of the entire market. 4 bedrooms, it starts to take a huge jump down to about 12%. And then when we hit 5, 6, 7, and 8 bedroom listings, I mean, you're less than 3% overall for the entire market.
Wow.
So, but that also pairs well with what the actual demand is. The actual demand is typically for a 2 and 3 bedroom home. But I think as an investor, you've got a lot of power if you can sell yourself on a 1 bedroom that's got the built-in bunks and a sleeper sofa. Now you can compete against a 2 bedroom. And if you get a 4 bedroom, you have power to potentially compete against a 5 or a 3 bedroom listing. It's just trying to figure out the numbers and shake it out and make it really work. But we have a good bit of everything between condos, houses, specific markets. You really need someone very specialized because Fort Morgan behaves as its own animal. Um, I can't begin to compare condos in that market to condos in Orange Beach because, 1 bedroom, and I love giving personal examples of close
Yeah,
friends and contacts. I have a friend who started off as a mentor, and I use her example all the time. And I have active text from her, so nothing's better than personal experience. She
that's
owns
right.
10 or 12 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms in this series of buildings called the Phoenix in Orange Beach. Very popular, great location, best amenities, building construction quality, etc., etc. A 1 bedroom there, she's doing 80 to $85,000, and she's not even the top 1%. As a savvy agent, my goal is to show you the pathway to execution to get you in the upper 20th percentile of this market.
That's right.
Um, but it's so powerful to be able to show folks that because that's on 450. But if I sold you the same thing in Fort Morgan, I don't think I can get you to break outside of 65, $70,000. Um, and so, and people look at that all the time and they go, well, that's for a 1 bedroom. And I say, yes, but a 1 bedroom in Orange Beach is 450. A 1 bedroom in Gulf Shores could be anywhere from, I don't know, 300 to 400K. Even though it's so much cheaper, it makes sense that you'd want to take that. But the demand and the average daily rate, it's not the same. And so we have to be very, very careful. And then the next thing is houses. you know, we have to be careful when we get down into Fort Morgan because while it looks like we have dedicated trails, it's not quite exactly the same. We just need to be very delicate about making sure that you understand where the beach access entry is versus if we have you in town down West Beach or even in Orange Beach. Some folks will send me residential properties and I say, look, this is tiptoeing the plat maps that we have that designate STR friendly from STR unfriendly. And I
Mm,
just don't think this is a smart idea because while Gulf Shores is overall incredibly short terminal friendly, they're very serious about making sure that the residential areas stay untouched. So as long as we're within a block or two of the beach, we're typically very fine. And they lay this out very cleanly, very clearly. And those lines will probably never change. But, if you start tiptoeing into residential neighborhoods because the money looks great, then I'm not the one to be able to help you out with that.
got it. Makes sense. So we talked a little bit about pricing. What has changed in the market in the last year? I know in the beginning of the stream, if you weren't with us, Justin talked a little bit about the airport. This has made kind of waves. I know Bill has been talking about this for a couple of years now. Obviously, bringing in an airport is going to bring in millions of new tourists. What does that look like? How's the market changed? Has that brought new tourists? Is that panning out well for people? What does that all look like?
It's bringing new tourists, but it's also bringing new opportunity. Once again, another lovely little statistic here is that based on comparable mature vacation markets like Panama City Beach, for example, that seen an influx of commercial flights, the surrounding residential area saw a 25% boost in appreciation. And so basically get in now while you still can. Our numbers, our entry level price is nowhere near what Destin and 30A is. We're significantly cheaper, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't know what that boost in appreciation due to all that additional traffic is going to really do to the market down here. And so you are right. We do have that. It's been here for a while, but it hasn't really gained traffic up until recently. We have the Southwest's largest indoor water park called Tropical Falls at OWA, which is a very lovely thing to go do. Um, and so between that and then all the major growth from tourism, I think the city posted for 2025 and said that they saw $3 billion in tourism dollars spent in Gulf Shores alone.
Wow.
So that tells me that there's a lot of opportunity based on all the new tourism that's gonna come, and you need to be positioning your marketing efforts towards that fly-in traffic, because what that means is that while we've been what you might consider a recession-proof drive-to market for many years, that avatar is probably going to change. And so no longer is mom and dad going to show up with 12 beach chairs for the family and all the
Mm-hmm.
sand toys and all the other things. Even though it's going to be annoying to consistently buy and replace coolers, sand toys, beach chairs, and the boogie boards, you're probably going to get a 2 to 3x return on your investment and perceived value just based on those items really alone.
Makes sense. That's really interesting. Um, what do you think is the biggest misconception about Gulf Shores market in Alabama? Like, what do people need to know? Or maybe what's something that they come to you thinking that you kind of have to demystify and reframe their thought process around?
That it's short-term rental friendly. I don't know why. I get this question all the time. Um, and you know, I think the big thing that you can do for yourself, even if you don't want to buy in my market, is you just simply Google, short-term rental restrictions X market, and then you
Mm-hmm.
go to the city's main website. And people get irritated, I think, because they see, you know, they see the fact that the city levies a lodging tax against the people that come there and stay. But that's the city's way of ensuring that you, as an investor, are going to get to continue to operate. I mean, it's not really coming out of your dime; it's getting charged to the guest on their end. Um, but the city has found a way to once again leverage
Hmm.
the people coming there and the tourism, and tourism is becoming a big part of our financial opportunity here for the city. So they're not going to let that change.
So Josh had a question on Facebook, and if you guys have questions, we are watching. He said, "What condo complexes make sense on East Beach of Gulf Shores?"
I typically say, in my opinion, I don't like very many of them. And I don't typically point folks to very many inside Gulf Shores proper. I think that comes from a very specific avatar person that, once again, they want more location and views. These condo complexes get you even closer to the water than the ones down Fort Morgan do. Um, so if you're okay with that, then that's where I typically would go to. I think there's quite a few that I actually like, but I more pick amenities. Amenities make the building and they make the experience over the specific building. And so that's a complex question to ask because what I'm searching for is to say, hey, do we have a heated pool? Do we have a hot tub? Do we at least have one or the other? Do we have a gym? Because these are the things that are going to check boxes for you on your Airbnb listings. That's going to drive traffic and going to drive revenue more so than a specific building or even a specific location.
Got it. Okay. Awesome. Josh, if you have any other questions, feel free to throw them in the comments or anybody else watching. We'd love to hear from you guys. So, what challenges are you thinking if you come in as a new investor to the market? Like, what challenges do people run into? We always like Shock at Savvy about the positives and the negatives, right? So that because every negative, as long as you can solve it, right, is worth talking about, rather than going into something with the wrong expectations. So, Justin, what do people have to account for when they come into the market that maybe they weren't thinking about before?
I tell folks all the time that there's three things that's going to ensure your success in this market, and it's a very simple pathway. It's design, amenities, execution. And I think the one thing
It's like
that
that in
folks
most markets, right?
look, right? I know. I think the one thing that folks never really account for is the design. You
Yeah.
know, even though the places don't look like grandma's beach cabin, okay, they've got very dull colors, they've got dated decor, there's no sharp snaps of color, maybe even the photography. When you really look at some of these photos, right? Like the room is dark, the pictures are grainy, the TV has got a blare. I can see your fingers in the mirror in the in the bathroom,
Oh yeah.
okay? And so I think the photography and the design is the biggest thing that catch folks off of their game. And you just need to consider. Bill talks about this a lot, where don't buy a place at the top of your budget if you can't quite commit to leaving room for a little bit of money in design.
Yeah.
And we can find a way to really balance some of these things with you, but we still have to be very careful. And we can even try to work some of this into the negotiation by asking for seller credits, by asking for credits to be held in escrow to be released by vendors' receipts. We can get very creative for you based on your budget and where it really is.
Got it. So, um, when we're talking about the actual listings themselves, what are some of those design elements? What are some things that they can do to actually set themselves apart, especially potentially if they have either? And let's talk about budgets for those, right? So they have a limited budget, or do they have a good, healthy budget? What are some things that they can do at either end of that spectrum?
Yeah. So let's say that let's start small and work towards a bigger scale. Small things that you can really do: wallpaper murals. My wife loves to do these in our places. They're, $350 to $500. Typically, you put them over a large wall, and that's going to be kind of butted up against where you have your view. If you've got a bigger budget, you can do an actual painted mural. Some of those go for a couple $1,000s, but worth every penny. I can tell you that the wallpaper murals are great, but it's just that it's wallpaper. But they still photograph fabulous. The next thing is, well, I think this is bigger in mountain markets like Tyler's. The arcade machines are coming to the beach. Um, and everyone loves the big stand-ups. Yes, they're dramatic in the pictures, but I tell you what, I really, really like seeing, and I can get no one to pull the trigger on this, so I'm gonna do this fall in my own. Is they're a foot and a half tall by a foot wide, and they're mini arcade machines that are
Yeah.
drywall mounted with drywall screws. They're $175 a piece versus $800 for a big one. I'd
Yeah.
rather see someone take and go snatch up four or five of those, because the whole purpose of these arcade machines, it is okay. Sometimes the dads like to go play a round of NFL Blitz on them, fine, sure. But the bigger thing is that we want the kids to be occupied, to have things to do, so that way the couples that are there enjoying themselves, or the friends, or whoever's there, they can all sip wine, enjoy the views, talk amongst themselves, and the kids can just be kids and have fun. Now, the next thing is going to be, the fifth element, right? The ceiling. I see people like Ashita and Bria Faith do the most incredible things on ceilings. Leslie just did her first wallpaper mural on a ceiling, most recently, and it turned out absolutely gorgeous. These are just things where I think it used to be in 2020, 2021, 22. You could just buy any old place, put it up on Airbnb, and it would just make stupid money. And those days they're not quite gone, but they're almost gone. And cute, clean, and comfortable works in some scenarios, but people really want to pay for an experience. And so it's your job to give them that experience through design. Bright, flashy colors. Some of these things may seem obnoxious to you, and you're like, well, I'd never do that in my personal home. Well, this isn't your personal home, and
Yeah.
folks are coming to
Exactly.
you for an experience. The next big thing is personal hot tubs. They cost 5,500 to 10,000 bucks, and I have a statistic here. They could get you up to $75 a night more in overall revenue, um, and it's worth absolutely every penny. Once again, it comes back to an experience. The average person who's splitting up this stay to come stay at your beach house, they don't have a hot tub in their backyard.
Yeah.
Um, the next thing, personally for me, I have an electric car. I love it. I refuse to drive it anywhere. If I have to take my wife's gas car, I absolutely throw a fit. Um, EV chargers, they cost $550 by the time you pay for the charging station and electrician to come wire it up. Less
Hmm.
than 2% of all of Gulf Shores offers EV charging, which is huge, especially with EVs kind of, maybe they're paving the way, maybe they're not. That's a whole other conversation for another time. And then you've got these little one off things, all the big game rooms that you could really put effort, money, and energy into. I have clients that just bought a house recently, and I thought this was the coolest thing. For less than $1,000, they're putting up a projector, a big tight screen, and they're putting in a mini golf simulator and a little kickball and a whole little thing for the kids and the dads and the moms to really play on. I'm like, okay, that is awesome. And then you've got the barrel saunas, the heated pools, and if you have a pool and you don't have a heater, it's something you should really look into. And then the next biggest traffic driver in terms of, well, it will affect your design to some extent as well, is going to be being Gulf front, ocean front. You could have a 25 to 40% boost in revenue alone just from your views of your condo. A lot of these buildings may be Gulf front but have no Gulf views, and that's a huge thing for you to really consider.
Got it. It sounds like there's so many different things that investors can focus on. And I think for me, this is one of the reasons it's so important to work with a savvy agent, is because these are all the things we focus on. I keep asking you question after question after question, and you have answer after answer after answer, not even just answers, but answers backed up by data, statistics, facts, things like that. Where do you get your data from? Like, how do you know all of this about the market?
So a lot of this is pulled from sites like AirDNA, Data Rabu, the tourism websites, and then a lot of it is just personal experience, which I think trumps a lot of things. But I think having a background in healthcare, I like my facts, I like my statistics. And so I always find it best to offer that to people because that alone speaks for itself. Um, and so I think it's very important that you let that paint the broad picture. And then from there, we can get very niche specific if we need to, based on your specific scenario. But I love AirDNA. I think that a lot of people have issues with it and say it's not accurate data. And I think that AirDNA is within 10 to 15% of the most accurate pieces of data that we can really get. And a lot of people, I have to explain this a lot of times. AirDNA has the longest, I think 10 or 12 years of trailing data. It scrapes through the different platforms, Airbnb and VRBO and Booking and all those things. But it has a formula just the same way as Rabu does, where it calculates your posted average nightly rate divided by your occupied nights, and that's how it figures revenue, and then it works in cleaning fees from there. But when you put in a very property specific address, it's going to tell you a range. And that's where people go, well, I don't believe it. That's fine. It's just meant to get you in the ballpark. That's the point then where I come in and I start to show you property specifics. We look at the actual pieces of data because just because it says you're going to do $100,000 a year doesn't mean that I can't get you up to 150, 160. Let's
Yeah.
take a look at what this place is missing. Or maybe I was way off and it's saying $100,000 a year, but realistically, we need to dial that back in and say 60 or 70.
Yeah. And
And
you can
here's
always see
why.
that. Like I'm on AirDNA right now, and you can always prove somebody right very, very quickly when they're asking, like, oh, well, what can this property do? By going in there and typing an address of something that already exists on Airbnb that you know is doing really well. For instance, right now I'm looking at my property, Asheville Grand Getaway, which is doing about 1,200 bucks a night. Right now we're at 54% occupancy, but that's days available is only 317 so far, not 365. and that it's coming up as the number one comp for this property, and it's showing revenue is 240,000 already out of the 317,000 days available, but it's projecting the revenue of this property at 134,000, more than half of what the property is actually doing based on the number one comp, which is the actual property of the address that I'm putting in. And so that's, you can really tell how you can do. I think what I always like to do is I like to look at the top properties in any given market and then figure out like how can I replicate or do better than what those top properties are doing, and then there's no reason that I shouldn't do as well or better as those top properties. Is it kind of similar in Gulf Shores?
It's very similar. And I like to do the exact same thing. And that's how I really kind of define what I think are winning choices and not winning choices. Yeah, I always tell folks, please, if you're so active on Zillow or Realtor.com, send me whatever you have. I'm not going to say I care more about our relationship than I do about earning a dollar. And so I'm happy to tell you no. And a lot of times it's more of a no than it is a yes until we find the right property. Um, and so we use that to then filter down and find comparables that make sense based on what you're looking for. And we kind of titrate that to effect, so to speak, based on amenities, based on what your budget is. And then we find you the top two, three choices in the area. And then if you like what you see, then we go out and we get video and then we start the whole kind of, process from there. And we can get real granular with pro formas if you're a real big data person. That's what you really need. Whatever kind of helps really point you to the right direction at the end of the day is what matters most.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Okay. What do people need to know about the area that they almost never know coming into it? What's typically a surprise for people?
I think the big thing is it's a big condo market. Um, we have houses, but not a lot, not compared to condos. Um, I think there's that piece of data, but then I also think that if I put you down in the Fort Morgan region, you have a lot more power, not just in terms of purchase power, but also in terms of lodging taxes to the city. You're going to save roughly 10%. Your guests will save 10% by booking with you already just by owning down there. And so if we have that ongoing, let's say you get very creative and you pick up a 3 bedroom and your goal is to compete against 4 bedroom houses. Well, now not only can you compete with them against amenities and total sleeping counts, but you can also take that 10% into consideration that you're going to save, and you can compete as well on pricing, which you can already compete on pricing anyways, but now you have even more advantage. So I think there's that. And then the next big thing is understanding that while Fort Morgan offers advantages and disadvantages, one of the big things is understanding that it's got dozens on dozens of what I call these beautiful mega beach mansions. And people go, that's fine, but I want to be in town. And so then we have to have that same consideration. And so I think just understanding the fact that certain things may be a 15 to 20-minute drive away, the avatar that comes here, they just really don't care about the distance that they're going to be away from things.
Makes sense. Um, what does the future look like? Gulf Shores, a couple years down the road, from what you're telling us, more tourists are coming, number of people are increasing. What is inventory going to look like? Is there too much? Is it getting saturated? What does the future look like for Gulf Shores?
We still have a very, very high demand. Um, they're trying to build more stuff down there. And there's a big opportunity. I hate to keep referring to Fort Morgan. Maybe my passion for that area just really just sticks out. But um, you know, okay, they're building more, or they're trying to. What they're building now is more focused on the ultra luxury, ultra wealthy Wendy. And I don't know that for our average investor that makes sense. So I don't think that's even going to phase or affect you. If anything, I think that's going to give the average investor more opportunity. The next thing that I see is more building that's blurring the lines of residential and STR friendly.
Hmm.
Once again, I don't see that being a problem. The next thing that I see is the Fort Morgan is a opportunity beyond opportunity, and I say this because everyone has read Nicholas Sparks' books, or everyone has seen the Notebook, which is actually how we named our business Seabrook. Uh, but when you turn off the main road heading into Fort Morgan, you are confronted by these beautiful, lush green trees hanging over the road, Spanish moss draping over them, these winding, turning, long roads. You end up seeing all kinds of beautiful, lush greenery, hiking trails, beautiful houses, condos. It starts to get very quiet. Everything kind of slows down around you. You're surrounded by Mobile Bay on one side, Little Lagoon, which is an intercoastal body of water, and then finally you break through to where you see the Gulf and the bay on the other. But in all that open space, some of it is for sale. A lot of it is for sale.
Hmm.
Now, we call it Fort Morgan because while it has a Gulf Shores address, they annexed themselves away from the city many, many years ago to try to keep it quiet and isolated, um, and very, minimal on new buildings and all these things. But if for some reason that should ever change or the demand grows, ironically enough, the city's been trying to re-annex Fort Morgan back into them, and the city actually owns land there, which I think is very
Hmm.
intriguing. Not sure how that works, but I'm not into politics enough to understand it. But
Sure.
if that ever happens, then I think all those properties that are 15 to 25% below, main value inside the city limits, I think you're going to see an explosion of appreciation down there. But I think overall, tourism is going to continue to grow and grow. And I think that as that happens, demand is going to continue to grow. And as demand grows, pricing is going to go. In fact, actually, our demand is up 5% year over year, and our average nightly rate is up 3.2-ish% year over year. It's buried in my book of stats right now. Um, but it is ever so increasing year over year, which I think all points towards a healthy market. In fact, Claude AI gave me a full summary because I uploaded all this data into Claude because I'm making some things for some social media stuff I'm going to be doing with it later. But Claude's like, I would label Gulf Shores as a well mature institutionalized vacation market, meaning it's a safe place to come sink your money.
Yeah, I'm looking at AirDNA right now, and I'm looking even back to pre-COVID numbers, right back to 2018. And so far this year, one of the most interesting things that I'm seeing is the 2026 line of listing revenue by month. It is above every other year since 2018. It's the dark blue line. It is at the top. It's close, but it is at the top. It is above 2019. It's above 2020. It's above 2021. It's above 2022. And every year actually is like that. So there's a lot of markets out there that people are talking about that, are saying like, oh, well, you got the COVID bump and you're never going to get those numbers again. I'm not seeing that for Gulf Shores. I'm definitely seeing more revenue than pre-COVID, but 2021 is right there in the middle. 2022 is barely a little bit above that. 2023, 4, 5, and so far 2026 is above all of that, as the number one year of listing revenue, average listing revenue per month so far. 2026 is $5,500. 2025 was 5,100. 2024 4,400. But certainly, even right now, looking at just this past April's data in this year, you're trending above everything that you've ever done in the past in the market. And that's average revenue per listing. And that means that despite the number of listings growing, the revenue is still outpacing that.
Yep. Yeah, I've seen some stronger numbers this year. I just turned my portfolio actually over to a professional revenue manager. Um, Things have just gotten a little busier this year, as you can imagine, for myself. But I've been seeing stronger numbers as well come in, so that kind of fully aligns with what you're saying.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I know you've been talking about it online, and so I think it's really, really interesting. If you look at April this year to April last year, total revenue last year was 48 million. Total revenue this year was 58 million, which is a massive increase, 21.8% increase in the number of revenue year over year spent in the market. And that continues to go up, even including pre COVID numbers. Every single year, it is more and more and more and more every summer. You look at June of 2024, and that was 113 million. June of 2025 was 130 million. So it continues to go up and it's outpacing the number of new listings. So to me, this is definitely an investable market.
Agreed. Agreed. Agreed.
Justin, how can people connect with you if they want to learn more, see available properties, put an offer in absolutely today? What's the best way to connect with you?
I like to just give people my personal cell phone. I really do. So you can reach me on 251 278 2527. You can just flat out email me, Justin at savvy.realty. Um, and or I'm pretty active. I'm very active on Facebook, just Justin Powell, and Instagram, which I don't do Instagram much. And I got a new phone, and I'm not even logged into Instagram, so I couldn't tell you what that handle is, anyways.
Well, if somebody wants to book a call with you today, it looks like there's 2 slots left, and that's savvy.realty/Justin to book a call with Justin. Any parting gifts for everyone here?
Parting gifts, yes. Self management versus professional management. Let's talk about that real quick, 'cause that will suck your cash flow more than anything. If you need professional management, that's great. I got plenty of great things. In my new analysis I was doing for the week, it pulled something very interesting, and I just think it's worth sharing because the data is right in front of me. I'm not going to name names, but I have the top five, and you can find them in AirDNA, largest property managers in Gulf Shores, ranking 4.48, 4.56, 4.64, 4.59, and 4.63. If these were steakhouses, I would choose any one of them. 4.6 out of 5 stars, I'm going. However, these things matter so much when you're sharing listings with me and I share with you historical data and you cringe and you start to shut down on me. And I tell you, historical data doesn't matter. I own 3 properties side by side. One did 42, one did 54, and one did somewhere in the middle last year. Why is that? I don't know. Stroke of luck. But now, if I position a property to you and I say, hey, prime example, Natasha's does $80,000. Here's 3 others in their DNA doing between 75 and 85K. Okay, but this one did $42,000 last year. Who managed it? Why? Why does that matter? Then we have to get into a whole conversation about quality and conversions and Airbnb and how they really prioritize your ranking overall, because you have to think it's a business and they get money by selling your listing. And so if the person who's managing your listing has a low review star count, then it's going to ultimately affect how many first page search impressions you show up under. And so I like to tell folks just to kind of forget about that. If you need someone, we'll find you someone, but all the tools are in place. We're here to make sure that you get what you need to be able to self manage, and that when you buy with a savvy agent, we're happy to give you our active Rolodex of cleaners, handymen, plumbers, electricians, help guide you towards your software stack that you need. That way, we can ensure that you fall into that 20th percentile whenever you do start to execute this on your own.
Makes sense. Awesome. Justin, thank you so much. If you have any questions, if you're watching this later, you didn't get to watch this live, put them in the comments. We will take a look at those later. Justin and I will be watching and happy to get in and answer any of those for you guys. Justin, really good to see you today. Really good to
You
see
too,
all
Tyler.
of you and appreciate y'all coming to hang out with us today and learn about Gulf Shores, Alabama short-term rental market.